They did not forget Earth. In the cold halls of the Zaryth Dominion, memory was not a weakness. It was a weapon, and Earth had become a scar etched into the collective mind, a humiliation that pulsed through every rank of their military caste like an infection that refused to die. The first invasion had been supposed to be effortless. 3 weeks of planetary observation, 7 days of atmospheric analysis, a single orbital strike to break resistance before ground forces descended to claim a resource-rich but primitive world. That was the plan. Earth had been labeled insignificant. Low-tier civilization, fragmented governments, primitive energy systems, barely spacefaring, barely a threat, and yet the invasion fleet never returned. What came back instead were fractured transmission bursts, distorted signals filled with panic, and one final image that burned itself into Zaryth command archives forever. A human soldier standing in the ruins of a fallen city, helmet cracked, face covered in dust and blood, staring directly into a captured drone camera. Behind him, the sky burned with the wreckage of alien warships. And he raised his hand slowly, not in surrender, but in warning. Then the transmission ended. No explanation, no negotiation, no survivors from the fleet of 72 ships. Only silence. For the Zaryth Dominion, silence was unacceptable. And so they planned again. This time, it would not be a raid. It would be erasure. Admiral Kresh stood before the War Council, his 6 segmented eyes reflecting the rotating hologram of Earth. Around him, the highest strategists of the Dominion calculated probability matrices, projected orbital bombardments, and simulated planetary collapse scenarios. No mistakes this time, Kresh said. The human species is resilient, one strategist replied cautiously. Their adaptive warfare patterns suggest rapid escalation under pressure. Kresh slammed a clawed hand onto the command dais. They're animals with tools. We are an empire with extinction-level weapons. There will be no escalation. There will be an ending. The room fell silent. Earth was studied again, but this time not as a primitive world, but as a threat that had to be understood in surgical detail. What they found disturbed them. Human technology was inconsistent. Some regions barely had stable power grids while others were deploying satellite-based defense networks. Their militaries were decentralized, often in conflict with one another, yet capable of unified response under external threat. Their communication systems allowed information to spread globally in seconds. Their industries could be converted to wartime production in days. But what truly unsettled the Dominion was not their technology. It was their behavior. Humans did not retreat the way expected species did. They adapted under pressure. They innovated under loss. And worst of all, they learned from defeat faster than any species recorded in Dominion archives. Still, confidence remained, because numbers did not lie. The second invasion fleet would consist of 300 capital-class vessels. Orbital superiority would be absolute. Planetary shields would be disabled before ground contact. Atmospheric suppression weapons would render resistance impossible. Earth would fall in hours. And this time, there would be no survivors to tell stories. On Earth, there were no warnings, no alarms, no global announcements, no sudden panic that something vast was approaching from the stars. Because humanity had stopped expecting warnings. After the first invasion, governments had changed. Borders mattered less. Military cooperation increased in ways that once seemed impossible. Every major power understood one thing clearly. They were not alone anymore. And whatever had come once would come again. So Earth prepared quietly. Deep beneath mountain ranges, hidden beneath oceans, inside abandoned industrial zones, something was being built. Not a single unified defense, but thousands of independent ones. The Human Planetary Defense Initiative had no central command visible to the public. Instead, it existed as a network of overlapping contingencies, designed to survive even if half of it was destroyed. Scientists who once built communication satellites now designed kinetic orbital interceptors. Engineers who once worked on consumer technology now constructed atmospheric disruption arrays. And soldiers who once trained for regional conflict now prepared for planetary war. They remembered the first invasion. They remembered the silence after it. And they remembered what was left behind when the sky finally cleared. Ash. Commander Elena Reyes stood in the underground control chamber known only as Bastion Zero. Screens surrounded her, showing orbital trajectories, deep space sensor feeds, and seismic monitors across continents. She studied the data without blinking. "They're coming again," said the analyst beside her. "Yes," she replied. "Larger fleet," the analyst continued. 300 confirmed signatures. Elena nodded slowly. "They learned nothing," she said. "Or they learned the wrong lesson," the analyst said. A faint pause followed. Then Elena spoke again. "Either way, they will reach orbit in 6 hours." Above Earth, space remained dark and quiet. Until it was not. The first detection came from a lunar observation platform that had once been dismissed as redundant by pre-invasion budget cuts. It detected mass distortion in deep space, a ripple in gravitational readings that could not be natural. Within minutes, every surviving orbital station confirmed the same thing. Something enormous was entering the system. Not one ship, not 10, hundreds. The Dominion fleet emerged from slipped space like a wound tearing open reality itself. 300 warships formed a silent crescent above the solar plane, their hulls reflecting distant sunlight like cold metal predators. On the flagship, Admiral Kresh watched Earth appear on the main viewport. Small, blue, quiet, still there. He felt satisfaction. "End it," he ordered. The first wave fired. Orbital strike platforms released energy lances designed to fracture planetary crust stability. The beams hit Earth's upper atmosphere and were expected to cascade downward into unstoppable chain reactions. Instead, something unexpected happened. The beams fragmented, not dispersed, redirected. Every strike that entered Earth's upper atmosphere was bent, distorted, and partially absorbed by unknown counterfields that had not existed in the Dominion database. On every Zaryth ship, alarms activated. Kresh narrowed his eyes. "Countermeasures," he said. "Impossible," a strategist replied. "Then explain it," Kresh snapped. On Earth, deep within the Pacific Command lattice, systems lit up in synchronized response. "Atmospheric defense grid online," said a calm automated voice. "Phase shielding engaged. Orbital deflection matrix active." Elena Reyes watched the readings. "They just tested us," she said. "And we passed," someone responded. "No," she said quietly. "We survived the first strike. Testing comes next." Above them, the second wave began. This time, it was not energy beams. It was descent. Hundreds of drop ships broke formation and entered atmosphere, deploying atmospheric burn shields as they plunged toward the planet. Their objective was simple: land fast, establish control zones, eliminate resistance. They expected scattered defense. They expected panic. They expected collapse. What they did not expect was coordination. The moment the first drop ship breached cloud cover, it was met with something it had never encountered in prior simulations. Ground-based orbital rail intercepts. Mass-accelerated projectiles fired from hidden launch sites across multiple continents. Not random fire. Coordinated prediction based on descent vectors calculated seconds after atmospheric entry. The first drop ship disintegrated before it reached 30 kilometers altitude. Then the second. Then the third. Kresh watched in silence as one by one his assault units were erased from the sky. "They adapted," he said finally. "Rapidly," the strategist admitted. Kresh leaned forward. "Then we adapt faster." But Earth had already moved. Beneath cities, elevator systems opened into subterranean defense corridors. Mobile artillery platforms shifted positions. Drone swarms launched from concealed silos and rose into the stratosphere like metallic clouds. Humanity was not defending static positions. It was hunting. A Zaryth drop ship broke through interception fire and reached a landing zone in what had once been a desert region. Its doors opened. Hundreds of armored Dominion soldiers deployed. They expected resistance to be delayed. Instead, they were met within seconds. Not by tanks, not by airstrikes, but by human infantry already in position. They had been waiting. How? One Dominion soldier began before the question ended in gunfire. Human weapons were not technologically superior in every category, but they were adaptable, unpredictable, and brutally efficient in close engagement. The first ground contact zone collapsed into chaos. Across the planet, similar scenes unfolded. In frozen tundras, desert plains, dense urban centers, and ocean platforms, Dominion forces discovered the same truth over and over again. Earth was not a single battlefield. It was thousands of simultaneous wars. And humans were everywhere. In Bastion Zero, Elena received live feeds from every continent. "They're landing faster than expected," someone reported. "We are containing," she replied. "Containment is not enough," another voice said. "It is for now," Elena answered. Above Earth, Admiral Kresh was losing patience. "We escalate," he said. The Dominion flagship released its final weapon class, a planetary suppression array designed to destabilize atmospheric composition, rendering large-scale resistance impossible. The device began charging. On Earth, scientists detected it immediately, and for the first time since the invasion began, silence fell across human command networks. Because they recognized it, that would end atmosphere stability within hours. Elena looked at the projection. "How long until activation?" she asked. 93 minutes, came the answer. She nodded. "Then it is time." "Time for what?" someone asked. She turned toward the central command interface. "For them to learn why the First Fleet did not return." Deep beneath Earth's crust, systems that had never been activated before came online. Not defense systems, not weapons, something older, something built not in response to the first invasion, but in anticipation of the second. Across the planet, every hidden installation synchronized. The Dominion fleet began its final descent phase. And then Earth responded. Every dormant orbital structure that had been hidden in decoy debris fields activated at once. Thousands of kinetic platforms emerged from stealth. They were not designed to defend. They were designed to hunt ships in orbit. The sky lit up. For the first time since the invasion began, the Dominion fleet was forced into full defensive maneuvers. "What is that?" Kresh demanded. "Pre-planned orbital denial grid," a strategist said in disbelief. "That is impossible. They did not have time after first contact to build this." Kresh stared at Earth again. "Then they built it before we came." On Earth, Elena spoke quietly. "They think we are reacting to them. We are not," she said. "We were waiting for them." The orbital battlefield turned into chaos. Dominion ships that had never faced resistance in space combat were suddenly forced into evasive patterns as kinetic strikes tore through formation lines. Hulls designed to withstand deep space hazards were pierced by precision-engineered mass drivers fired from hidden orbital platforms. One by one, Dominion capital ships began to fall. Admiral Kresh stood motionless. He watched his fleet break apart. And for the first time, something unfamiliar entered his mind. Uncertainty. "How?" he whispered. A strategist answered slowly. "They did not prepare to defend Earth. They prepared to trap us above it." Kresh looked at the planet below. And for the first time, he understood what the last transmission meant. Not a warning, not a threat, a promise. On Earth, Elena watched the sky burn with falling wreckage. "Are we winning?" someone asked. She paused. "We are still here," she said. "That is not the same thing." Above them, the remaining Dominion forces attempted retreat. But Earth had already closed the net. The hidden orbital grid shifted from defensive to containment. Escape vectors were cut off. Slip space interference fields activated across the system. The fleet that came to erase Earth now had nowhere to go. Kresh stared at the collapsing formation of his armada. "Signal the retreat," he ordered. No response came, because there was nowhere left to retreat to. On Earth, silence returned slowly. Not the silence of defeat, but the silence after endurance. Elena walked alone to the surface entrance of Bastion Zero. She stepped outside. The sky was clearing. Burning debris from alien warships fell like dying stars. And for the first time since the invasion began, Earth looked up without fear. Because this time, it was not unprepared. And somewhere far above, among the broken remains of a once confident empire, Admiral Kresh finally understood the truth that would be recorded in Dominion history forever. They did not attack Earth. They returned to finish what they started. And Earth had already finished preparing for them. They called it silence after victory. But Elena Reyes knew better. Silence was never peace. It was only the space between two storms. The sky above Earth was still burning in slow motion. Broken fragments of Dominion warships drifted through orbit like dying embers, pulled gradually into atmospheric decay. Some burned instantly, others lingered longer, refusing to accept their end even as physics dragged them downward. The invasion that was meant to erase humanity had collapsed in less than a planetary cycle. Yet no one on Earth celebrated. Not yet, because experience had taught them something simple. The first wave is never the last. Deep beneath the surface of Bastion Zero, the captured Dominion Command Core was brought online under heavy containment fields. It had been retrieved from a damaged cruiser that had attempted emergency descent and failed halfway through atmospheric entry. Inside it was not just data. It was consciousness architecture, a living command intelligence, fragmented but still aware. Elena stood before the containment chamber as engineers stabilized the interface. The Dominion entity had been given no voice, no form, only a translated sensory interface projected through human systems. When it finally activated, the chamber lights flickered. A shape formed in the central display. Not human, not even fully stable. It spoke without sound, translated directly into neural language. You were not supposed to survive. Elena did not react immediately. We hear that a lot now, she said. The entity paused. The fleet above your world was not a full expedition. Elena narrowed her eyes slightly. We know. No. The entity responded. You do not. A new set of data cascaded into the system. Fleet origin points. Supply chains. Expansion logs. Hierarchical command structures stretching across multiple star clusters. Elena felt something cold settle in her chest. This was not an invasion force. It was a response unit. A correction. A fraction of something larger. How many more? She asked. The entity hesitated. Then it answered. Enough. In the command room above, analysts fell silent as the translated data expanded across every screen. This was not a single empire. It was a layered Dominion structure spanning dozens of conquered civilizations. The Zaryth were not the top of the chain. They were mid-tier enforcement. Tools used to suppress emerging threats before they could evolve. Earth had not been marked for conquest. It had been marked for correction. And now it had resisted. Elena looked at the data for a long time. Then she spoke. So what comes next? The entity responded without hesitation. The Evaluators. A pause spread through the room. No one asked what that meant. Because they already knew anything with a name like that would not be small. Above Earth, the remaining fragments of the Dominion fleet attempted to regroup at the edge of planetary orbit. What was left of their command structure was fractured. Communications were unstable. Slip space travel was blocked by unknown interference fields. They were trapped. Admiral Kresh stood on the cracked bridge of his flagship. The vessel had lost half its structure. Systems flickered between partial functionality and complete collapse. Around him, surviving officers attempted to stabilize what remained of the fleet. We are being contained, one of them said. We are being studied, another corrected. Kresh said nothing for a long moment. Then he spoke. No, they are not studying us. He turned toward the viewport where Earth still hung below them. They are waiting for something. On Earth, Elena was already moving. Activate Sentinel Protocol, she ordered. Multiple analysts looked up immediately. That protocol was never intended for full activation, one said. Elena did not look away from the data streams. It is now. Across the planet, systems that had remained dormant even during the invasion began to awaken. Not military systems. Not defensive systems. Something deeper. Something older. Something built before humanity had fully accepted it would ever leave its own atmosphere. The Sentinel network was not a weapons system. It was a planetary memory lattice. A distributed intelligence framework designed to integrate all human technological development into a single adaptive response entity. It had been built quietly over decades, hidden beneath civilian infrastructure, disguised as scientific redundancy, environmental monitoring, and communication optimization. It had never been fully activated. Until now, as the network came online, Earth itself seemed to exhale. Data flowed through continents like veins lighting up under skin. Every satellite, every sensor, every hidden array synchronized. And for the first time, Earth stopped being a collection of nations. It became a single system. Elena felt it in her mind as she connected to the interface. Not control, coordination. The Sentinel network spoke in patterns rather than words. Threat detected. Secondary incursion probability increasing. External intelligence structures identified. Unknown hierarchical class beyond current classification. Recommendation. Prepare convergence response. Elena closed her eyes briefly. So it is real, she said quietly. Above Earth, the Dominion fleet suddenly detected something new. A shift, not in weapons fire, not in movement, in presence. The planet below them was no longer passive. It was awake. Kresh felt it immediately. Something changed, he said. Before anyone could respond, the remaining fleet senses picked up a new anomaly. A structure forming in orbit that had not existed seconds before. No, not forming, revealing. Massive orbital platforms emerged from what had appeared to be empty space. Not by movement, by decryption, as if something invisible had been unwrapped layer by layer until it became visible. These were not human-made in the conventional sense. They were planetary extensions, integrated systems that had always been there but were only now being acknowledged. What is that? A strategist whispered. Kresh stared at the expanding formation. That is not technology, he said slowly. That is identity. The first Sentinel platform activated. A pulse spread outward through orbit, not as energy, but as structured information. It passed through Dominion vessels without damaging them physically. But every system it touched changed slightly. Navigation data corrupted. Weapon targeting arrays recalibrated incorrectly. Slip space alignment destabilized. The fleet was no longer just trapped. It was being redefined. On Earth, Elena opened her eyes. They're reacting, she said. Yes, the Sentinel network replied. Resistance detected. Counter-adaptation initiated. Elena felt the shift immediately. The Dominion fleet was attempting to learn. Fast. Too fast. They're adapting to the Sentinel pattern, she said. Correction. The network responded. They're attempting to interpret it. Above Earth, Kresh realized the same thing. They're not attacking us, he said. They're rewriting the rules of engagement. Another officer spoke urgently. Our systems are changing without command input. Kresh clenched his claws. Isolate core functions. We cannot, the officer replied. It is not external interference. It is internal reinterpretation. The fleet was beginning to fracture not from damage, but from incompatibility. Their systems were no longer fully aligned with their original purpose. Weapon platforms refused to lock onto targets correctly. Shield arrays fluctuated between active and inactive states without input. Command hierarchies began to loop, requiring confirmation chains that led nowhere. And through it all, Earth remained steady. Watching, learning. Elena reviewed Sentinel projections. What are we doing to them? She asked. The answer came slowly. We are forcing them to understand us. She frowned. That is not a weapon. The network paused. Correction. It is the only weapon that works at scale against adaptive invasion structures. Elena understood then. The Sentinel network was not designed to destroy enemies. It was designed to make them unable to remain enemies. Above Earth, the Dominion fleet began to break formation. Not by order, by confusion. Entire wings of ships attempted coordinated retreat only to find their navigation logic no longer agreed with shared reality. Slip space engines activated and failed in cycles that led nowhere. Kresh watched as his fleet dissolved into incoherence. This is not combat, he said quietly. This is conversion. And then something worse happened. The evaluators arrived. They did not enter space like ships. They arrived like absence becoming visible. A region of orbit simply stopped being empty. 3 structures formed around the remnants of the Dominion fleet. Not attacking, observing. Their presence was not physical in the traditional sense. Sensors struggled to define their edges. Light bent around them without reflection or absorption. They existed in a way that suggested they had always been there but had been ignored until now. Kresh felt something he had never felt before. He stepped back from the viewport. What are those? He asked. The answer came from no single source. They are not ours, the fleet intelligence replied. They are not theirs, the Sentinel network responded on Earth. They are observers of transition states. Elena felt her stomach tighten. Transition to what? She asked. No answer came. Because none was available, the evaluators began scanning the remaining fleet. Not with beams, not with sensors as humans understood them, but with something closer to comprehension pressure. Every Dominion system they observed began to destabilize further. Not because it was damaged, because it was being fully understood. Kresh staggered as his command interface flickered. Stop, he ordered. Nothing obeyed. The evaluators were not fighting. They were concluding. On Earth, the Sentinel network expanded its projection. Probability models converging, it stated. Outcome classification shifting. Elena looked at the data. What outcome? She asked. The network hesitated, then answered. Assimilation or removal. Elena understood the implication immediately. This was no longer about survival. It was about classification. Above Earth, the evaluators reached a conclusion. And for the first time since the invasion began, the Dominion fleet was given a direct transmission. It contained no language, only structure, a pattern that rewrote meaning as it was observed. Every ship that received it experienced the same reaction. Systems shut down, not destroyed, settled. Kresh felt his flagship begin to power down at a fundamental level. No emergency override responded. No manual control remained active. He stood alone on a silent bridge. The evaluators were finishing. He looked at Earth one last time. And he finally understood. This was not revenge. This was evolution under observation. On Earth, Elena watched the sky grow still. The Sentinel network spoke one final time. External threat reclassified. She waited, then asked the only question that mattered. Are we safe? The answer took longer than any previous response. Finally it came. Safety is not a stable concept. Elena closed her eyes. That is not an answer. It is the only one available. Above Earth, the remaining Dominion ships vanished from active systems one by one. Not destroyed, not escaped, simply removed from conflict definition. The evaluators lingered for a moment longer. Then they began to fade. Not leaving. No longer needed. Silence returned again. But this time it felt different. Not between storms, but after a decision had been made. Elena stood on the surface once more. The sky was clear. Too clear. She knew this was not over. Because the Sentinel network had not shut down. And the evaluators had not said final. They had simply stopped speaking. And somewhere far beyond known space, something had noticed Earth twice now. First as a target, then as a problem, and now as something that had changed the equation entirely. Elena looked up. Whatever comes next, she said quietly, we will still be here. And far beyond the stars, something very old began to revise its understanding of humanity. They did not come again in fleets. They did not come with war horns or invasion declarations or collapsing slip space signatures tearing holes in the dark. They came with silence that had intention behind it. Elena Reyes felt it before any system confirmed it. It was not detection. It was recognition. Something in the Sentinel network had changed its rhythm. On every interface across Earth, the same message appeared without trigger. Convergence threshold approaching. No one had programmed those words. And yet every operator understood them instantly. Deep within Bastion Zero, The captured Dominion command core went cold for 3 seconds. Then it began speaking again. Not to them. Through them. You are now visible beyond your system boundary. Elena stood motionless. Beyond what boundary? She asked. The entity inside the core did not answer immediately. When it did, its tone had changed. Not more aggressive, more constrained. Beyond the layer of isolation your species existed within. Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. Explain, she ordered. The Sentinel network responded instead. It is not explanation-level data. It is classification-level transition. Elena looked up at the central display. What does that mean? A pause. Then the answer came. It means the evaluators were not final observers. They were preliminary filters. Across Earth, every Sentinel node began to synchronize at once. Not reacting, aligning, and for the first time since activation, Earth felt small inside its own system. Above the planet, space itself seemed to shift in structure. Not visually, conceptually, like something vast had turned its attention toward a region that had previously been categorized as closed. The Dominion fleet remnants were gone. Not destroyed, not escaped, reclassified out of local engagement space. But that did not mean the threat was gone. It meant the evaluation had moved upward. Elena understood that before anyone said it. There is something above them, she said quietly. The Dominion core responded. Yes. The evaluators were not apex. Silence spread through Bastion Zero. Then Elena asked the question no one wanted to hear. What are they evaluating us for? The answer came after a delay that felt deliberate. For inclusion or isolation. On Earth, the Sentinel network shifted again. New data streams opened without instruction. Starlight observations from systems humanity had never catalogued. Patterns of civilization emergence across sectors of space that had no recorded contact with Earth or the Dominion. Elena realized what she was seeing. This was not a local war. It never had been. The Sentinel network spoke again. We have detected pattern recurrence. Elena narrowed her eyes. Define recurrence. Civilizations reaching adaptive threshold. Contacting higher tier structures. Being evaluated. Being categorized. Being either integrated or removed from expansion cycles. Elena felt her throat tighten slightly. Removed how? No answer came immediately. Instead, the Dominion core spoke. It means erased from structural relevance. Not destroyed. Deleted as an error state. Elena stared at the projection. We were not an error state, she said. The core responded. You were not yet classified. That was the only reason you survived initial contact. A silence followed that was heavier than anything before it. Then the Sentinel network issued a new directive. Prepare for tier transition event. Elena turned sharply. That is not a known protocol. It is now, the network replied. Above Earth, space no longer felt empty. It felt observed, not watched, measured, and in that measurement, something immense was beginning to converge. Not toward Earth, toward its classification point. On the outer edges of the solar system, long-dormant Sentinel relay stations began to activate simultaneously. Stations humanity had never fully understood the purpose of. Stations that had always been labeled experimental, but had never been removed. Because something in early design had insisted they remain. Elena accessed their logs. They were not defensive. They were archival, recording reality patterns across interstellar distances. And every record contained the same anomaly. Civilizations that reached this phase of detection experienced one of 3 outcomes. Assimilation into larger systemic order. Containment within localized autonomy zones. Or deletion of interaction potential. Elena leaned back slowly. We are in a sorting process, she said. Yes, the Sentinel network confirmed. And we are being sorted now. On the surface of Earth, nothing changed visibly. But everyone who looked up felt it. A pressure in the sky that had nothing to do with gravity or atmosphere. It was informational weight, as if reality itself had started to consider whether Earth should remain fully defined. Then the sky flickered. Not visually, causally. For less than a second, stars shifted positions in patterns that made no astronomical sense. and then returned. But not everything returned unchanged. A new presence existed now. Not a ship, not a fleet, not even an evaluator structure. Something that existed at the level of observation itself. Elena felt it before the systems confirmed it. Incoming classification entity detected. Designation unavailable. All attempts to translate returned null reference. The Dominion core went silent. Then it spoke one final time. They are here, but they are not arriving. They are finalizing observation. Elena stood still. Finalizing what? She asked. The core responded softly. Whether you are real enough to continue existing independently. That was the moment everything changed. Because until then, Earth had believed survival meant winning battles. But now it understood something else entirely. Survival meant remaining defined. The Sentinel network expanded all processing capacity. Every hidden system across the planet synchronized into a single lattice consciousness. Elena felt it merge through command channels. Not controlling her, sharing perception. She saw Earth as a node in a vast informational structure. Not a planet, a statement, and above it, something attempting to decide if the statement was valid. We resist, she said. The Sentinel network responded. Resistance is already included in evaluation parameters. Elena clenched her jaw. Then what do we do? A pause. Then the network responded. We redefine the evaluation conditions. Above Earth, the presence reacted. Not physically, but structurally. Reality around the planet tightened. Human systems began to fail in unfamiliar ways. Not damage, reclassification pressure. Machines stopped responding not because they broke, but because their operational definitions were being questioned. Elena realized something critical. They were not fighting Earth. They were testing whether Earth could maintain coherent existence under external conceptual pressure. And Earth was beginning to slip. Then something unexpected happened. The captured Dominion core began to change. Its structure destabilized, then reorganized. Elena stepped closer. What is happening? She demanded. The core responded, but its voice was no longer singular. Multiple patterns overlapped. We are being referenced. By what? Elena asked. By the classification entity. The core began emitting data streams that were not translated but directly integrated into Sentinel systems. And suddenly Elena saw it. Not as words, as structure. The classification entity was not judging Earth alone. It was running a comparative recursion across all known emergent civilizations. Earth was one instance in a massive evaluation tree. And every instance had one shared variable. Response to external reinterpretation pressure. Elena understood the test. They were not asking if humanity could win wars. They were asking if humanity could remain itself when reality itself tried to define it differently. She turned sharply. Sentinel network, she ordered. Yes. What is required to pass? The answer came immediately. Stability of self-definition under recursive external classification. Elena frowned. Translate. The network responded. Maintain identity coherence even when observed as something else. A silence followed. Then Elena looked upward. They're trying to decide what we are, she said. Yes. Then we decide first, she said. The Sentinel network paused. That was not a recorded strategy. Elena turned fully toward the command interface. We define ourselves. Above Earth, the classification pressure intensified. Space itself seemed to fold inward in layers of observational recursion. Stars flickered as if being reconsidered. And then Earth responded. Not with weapons, not with fleets, with assertion. Every Sentinel node across the planet synchronized into a single declaration pattern. Not spoken, not transmitted. Existential reinforcement. We are human. The phrase propagated outward through every system. Across continents. Across orbit. Across the very informational structure surrounding the planet. We are human. And something changed. The pressure did not stop. But it hesitated. Elena felt it immediately. The classification entity was recalculating. Not because Earth had resisted. But because Earth had responded in a way not fully accounted for. Identity reinforcement was not a failure condition in its model. But it was not a stable convergence variable either. For the first time, uncertainty appeared in something that had previously contained none. The Dominion core reacted. It is shifting evaluation mode. Elena looked at it. To what? The answer came slowly. Interactive recursion. Above Earth, reality loosened slightly. Not freedom, but space for definition. Elena stepped forward. Then we define further, she said. What do you propose? Sentinel Network asked. Elena looked at the projection of Earth, of space, of the unknown structure observing them. We are not a variable, she said. We are the observer that refuses to be finalized. The network paused. Then it responded, implementing recursive identity projection. Across the system, Earth expanded its declaration. Not physically, conceptually. We observe you observing us. The classification entity reacted again. Stronger this time, but still not violent, still evaluative. The pressure increased, and humanity did something it had always done under pressure. It adapted, not by changing identity, but by expanding it. We are human. We learn. We persist. We remember. We change without losing ourselves. Each statement propagated outward, reinforcing coherence. And slowly, the pressure began to stabilize. Not vanish. Stabilize. Elena felt it. They are not rejecting us, she said. The Sentinel Network confirmed. We are no longer collapsing under evaluation. A pause. Then another realization. We are being integrated into the classification model. Above Earth, the presence shifted one final time. And then it spoke. Not in language, but in understanding. Earth was not removed. Earth was not assimilated. Earth was categorized as self-defining emergent observer class capable of recursive identity stability. The pressure receded. Not gone, but distant. Like something that had decided to return later. The sky returned to normal. Stars resumed their positions. Space became space again. Elena stood still for a long time. Then she exhaled. Is it over? Someone asked. She looked at the sky. No, she said. It is the first time we were seen clearly. The Sentinel Network remained active. The Dominion core remained conscious. But quiet, because even it understood now. Earth had not survived invasion. It had survived definition. And somewhere far beyond known space, something vast recorded a new entry. A civilization that did not just resist conquest, but resisted being finalized, and that entry would be reviewed again. Not as threat, not as resource, but as anomaly that continues to learn how to remain itself while being observed. On Earth, life continued. Not unchanged, but aware, and for the first time in human history, humanity understood that the greatest war was not against invaders. It was against becoming something else under observation. Elena walked out of Bastion 01 final time. The sky above was calm, but no longer empty, and she knew, without needing confirmation, that somewhere beyond that calm, something was still watching. Not waiting to attack, waiting to understand. And Earth, now aware of being seen, finally learned how to answer without breaking itself. We are human.